moments, trying to compose herself, when she heard the whisper-soft movement of Tyne's hushed footsteps coming down the hall. Before her lady-in-waiting even opened the door, Evelayn caught the faint scent of roses and the mouth-watering aroma of her breakfast. Tyne's brief knock at her door seemed abnormally loud, making Evelayn jump. "Good morning, Princess," Tyne said, as she bustled into the room from the adjoining chamber. There was a glimmer, a depth to the rose colour of her skin that Evelayn had never noticed before. Tyne bore a tray laden with a mug of mint tea, a bowl of fresh fruit, and a berry scone drizzled with honey, Evelayn's favourite. She gave the princess a quick once-over, her eyebrows lifting at Evelayn's sweat and tear-streaked appearance, but all she said was, "How does it feel to come into your full power?" Evelayn hesitated for a moment, not sure how to put it into words, then finally said, "Different." Tyne shot her a conspiratorial smile as Evelayn finished unlacing her boots, pulled them off, and padded over to the table by the large eastern-facing window where her lady-in-waiting had set down the tray. "You'll grow accustomed to it soon. Then you'll wonder how you ever lived in such a dull state before." Tyne bustled over to pull back the curtains, letting the sunshine stream in. Evelayn flinched at the onslaught of light. "If you say so," she murmured, cutting off a piece of the scone. "You'll notice the difference during training as well. General Kelwyn said to tell you he's not giving you the day off." Evelayn groaned as she lifted the cup of tea and took a sip. "Of course not, because that might be perceived as preferential treatment, correct?" Tyne just gave her a look. "Fine, I'll go to training." She took another small bite of the scone, not looking up from the plate when she quietly asked, "Will I get to see my mother today?" There was a long pause, and then, "I hope so," which meant Queen Ilaria still hadn't returned to the castle from the war front, just as Evelayn had feared. A flutter of nerves threatened to upset the bit of breakfast she'd already eaten, but she just nodded, still staring down at her food. "Thank you, Tyne. That will be all for now." "But, Your Highness, your dress—" "That's all for now," Evelayn repeated. "Of course. Call for me when you're ready." Only after she heard the click of the door shutting did Evelayn glance over her shoulder to make sure she was truly alone. And then she stood up and crossed to the other window, the one that faced north, where far away on the border of Eadrolan and Dorjhalon, the light and dark kingdoms, war raged. A war that had lasted for over a decade, with heavy casualties on both sides, including Evelayn's father, the king of Eadrolan. She looked out toward the horizon, past the castle grounds, past the Dawn Temple, where the priestesses who weren't at the border upholding the wards that protected them from invasion lived and trained, past the city that was built to the northwest of the castle, where so many of the royal court and nobles dwelled, to the glimmering forest that stretched all the way to the border. Somewhere out there, her mother was fighting alongside her armies, trying to stop King Bain. Evelayn had begged her not to go on the most recent campaign, since her birthday was coming up, but the Queen had sworn she'd be back in time to celebrate with her. Her mother had never missed one of her birthdays before, and this was such an important one. The ball honouring Evelayn coming into her full power was to take place that night. It was to be the social event of the year, possibly even the century. It had been longer than that since a true royal had turned 18 and had a celebration, not since Queen Ilaria's own 105 years ago. "You promised," Evelayn whispered to the clear glass that allowed her to watch her people hurrying about their busy lives below, while she stood in her room, fighting back tears, afraid that there could only be one reason her mother would break her word. The midday sun was hot enough to make a dark Dorjhalon sweat, since they thrived on the cooler weather of fall and winter, but Evelayn welcomed the warmth and the extra boost of power it meant for her and her people as she walked out to the practice fields where Kelwyn waited with a couple of other Dorjhalon. When they saw her approaching, they all bowed, which she hated, but every time she told them to stop doing it, Kel would lecture her on proper decorum for someone of her station.